Welcome to Negotiation with Alice, your negotiation podcast. Everything that you do where you need to get on the same page with someone else is a negotiation. So whether you have to negotiate a contract with someone, or you simply need your boss to sign off on that program that you'd like to implement, or you want to figure out how to rebalance the chore structure in your home, or talk about what vacation you want to go on. All of these things are negotiations. So in my podcast, we go over both personal and professional conversations, which all are considered negotiation, and I will give you tips on how to come out ahead. Welcome to the show. Welcome to another episode of Negotiation with Alice. I've got Tim Shurr with us, who is an author. Welcome, Tim.
Hey, Alice, great to be with you.
I'm really excited to have you here. I'd love for you to tell my guest who you are, maybe a little bit about the books that you've written, and who you like to work with.
Yeah, so I'm a mind architect, right? So I design inevitable outcomes for high achievers and business owners, entrepreneurs, people who are wanting to get the best out of life, but go through it with peace instead of pressure, right? I was a celebrity hypnotist for a number of years. I've owned my own business for 30 years. I've done 16,000 sessions. So I got really good at figuring out what drives us at a deep unconscious level. So when people get stuck, I made it my business to learn how to get you unstuck and set you free in a way that feels easy and effortless. And so that's what I do. This method that I developed over the years is called the One Belief Away method. That's what the name of my book is called. I've written a few, but that's my latest one. And the premise is that you're one belief away from your next big breakthrough. So we just got to figure out what the hidden constraints are that might be holding you back in your mental operating system and upgrade them.
That's wonderful. And I love how you call yourself a mind architect. I'd love to know if is that something unique to you? Do you have other competitors in the field who also call themselves that? Or is that something that you've created and grabbed that niche for yourself?
Yeah, I believe that's a blue ocean term. So I haven't heard anybody else call themselves a mind architect. There's 7 billion people on the planet, so there might be someone else out there, but and if there is, good for them. So, right, this isn't about me. This is about just helping people to release the fears that hold us back, right? The pressure that keeps driving us. I call it achiever syndrome. That feeling like even when you've succeeded, it feels like it's never enough, or you can't take your foot off the gas because it'll all fall apart, or you'll miss opportunities. We're constantly being driven by this playing not to lose instead of playing to win. So it's always pressure and insecurity instead of peace and joy and doing it for the thrill of it all. So, that's what matters most.
So I'd love to sort of blend what you do with
Mhm.
negotiation and
Mhm.
have us talk a little bit about unconscious biases and how those things might affect your negotiation outcomes or maybe even the process itself. So I'd love to hear sort of like your perspective on unconscious bias and negotiation.
Yeah, it's a great question, Alice, and really important because you want to understand what your belief is about negotiation. Like, what is negotiating, right? Is that designed to get what you want, right? Is it designed to create compromise? Is it designed to create synergy? Is it designed to make sure that you walk away the winner? Or is it designed to make sure that everybody feel like they're winning, right? So you got to get clear on what your outcome and intentions are. And that's often driven by these beliefs that were formed in our mind when we were kids, and we don't connect those dots, right? So that if you feel like you always need to be the one in charge, or you always got to be the one that has the power, or you're always afraid of how people are going to view you, or you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, or you like to avoid conflict, these are all being driven based on these unconscious rules that were formed in childhood that are floating around in your unconscious mind. And so if we understand what's driving your beliefs, and then also if you can understand what's driving what beliefs are driving the person that you're negotiating with, right? That can be a little bit trickier sometimes. But if you can understand what they would have to believe in order to behave the way they are, the way they think they do, then you understand their model of the world. And if you understand where they're coming from, or you understand what their ultimate motives are, then it's kind of like playing cards with someone and you can see the hand that they're dealt.
So, that's the how or the what, right? Which is, understanding where the fact that your unconscious beliefs are coming from childhood, and also the fact that the other person has their set of unconscious beliefs or biases. And so
Mhm.
I would love to dive a little bit more into the how, right? So we tell people,
Mhm.
look, you need to understand where your belief system is coming from childhood. How do they even dig up things that are unconscious, short of just making some time with you, someone like you who can, get there? But if they were to try to understand their own unconscious biases around negotiation, how
Mhm.
can they start to understand themselves better on that deeper level?
That's a brilliant question. So the power of our life is being determined by or the quality of our life is being determined by the quality of the questions we ask ourselves. So that was a really brilliant question, Alice. And so there's two questions you can ask yourself in regards to negotiations, right? So the first one is, what would I have to believe in order to think or feel or behave in this way? Right? What would I have to believe? And you just keep asking yourself that over and over, because sometimes we're like onions, we got to get to different layers, right? And so if you just keep asking yourself, what would I have to believe to keep thinking that this is going to be stressful, or it's not going to end well, or, or I have to constantly be battling, or, I got to fight for what's mine, or whatever it may be, where'd you come up with that idea, right? What was the earliest experience you ever had with something like that? Right? Who did you grow up with that acted that way? If you weren't born with this belief, who might have had this belief when you were brought into the world, and you learned it from them? Who might that be? And what was their belief, based on what you observed? So those kinds of questions will help you dig a little bit deeper, and they'll help you find perhaps some blind spots that you're not seeing. I mean, hence the term blind spots, right? It's difficult to notice it within ourselves sometimes, which is why you need someone to help guide you, or even a friend who knows you really well, or a spouse. Sometimes we don't ask them because we don't want to hear the answer. Why? What would you have to believe to not want to hear the answer? Well, I'd have to believe that it makes me feel stupid, or it makes me feel like I'm not good enough, or it makes me feel like I'm not, leading or in charge. It's a weakness. So many people in negotiations are, don't want to be seen as weak. And I think that vulnerability is strength and can be used in a much more powerful way than trying to dominate. So that's the first question. And then the second question is, what would I rather believe instead? What would allow me to move through life with a heart at peace? And a lot of times people are like, I can't have a heart at peace because I'll lose. Well, you just revealed a limiting belief. You just revealed a belief that if you're not always in charge or winning or dominating, that you're going to lose. And if you lose, you're going to feel worthless. You're going to feel like a piece of, you fill in the blank. I mean, these are things that phrases that clients have said to me, right? My brain is just full of all the words and phrases that clients have said over all these years. So uh, these are the thoughts, the intimate thoughts that people have that they don't usually share out loud, or especially to others. So if you have a belief that if I'm not winning, I'm a piece of crap and I'm worthless, well, you can imagine what kind of behavior is going to come out of you.
Right.
So we see that in a lot of public figures. So we need to understand, well, what would you want to believe instead? Because beliefs are just opinions, and you have the ability to upgrade yours anytime you want.
So then, would it be fair to say, Tim, that if someone, let's just use me for an example, if
Okay.
I ask myself the question, what would I have to believe, and I ask myself over and over again, so I'm
Mhm,
digging, as you said, deeper and deeper, and trying to get to the root
mhm,
cause of that, right? So
mhm,
that once
mhm.
I get there, and then you said, ask yourself, what would I have to believe to do otherwise, right? To
Yeah.
switch
What would
that.
I want instead? What would I want to believe?
Okay, what would I want to believe? So
Yeah.
is that powerful enough to help someone actually change the core belief that they've been living with for decades on end? Or is there something else, right? Or is it as easy as discovering where it came from, my childhood when I was 5 years old, and then what do I want to believe? And then I think about that. Or do I have to repeat that every single day in order for that to become my reality?
Well, the answer is all of the above, right? For for all of us, our beliefs were formed when we were kids, and when we're children, we don't have the life experience, we don't have the self-awareness, the wisdom, the resources that we have collected as adults, right? If we had those experiences and resources when we were kids, maybe we would have interpreted the situations differently. Okay, but we didn't. So sometimes being able to uncover, wow, I have this fear that I'm going to be rejected, right? And that's why I'm constantly leaning in and hanging on and trying to control, because I'm just so afraid that I'm going to be rejected or abandoned, right? And I never realized that, or I didn't connect the dots that that's what was showing up in my negotiations, right, or in my business life. I didn't realize that was still there, as a hidden constraint. And now that I recognize this, I can shift this. I can look at this differently because I have new resources. I have new strategies that I can apply because I don't feel that way anymore, and I don't want to feel that way. And so now that I know what's really going on, it's like a parking brake that was set. You didn't know it was set. You just kept feeling the lag and you didn't know why. There's a parking brake. You can unfreeze it, right? You release it, and then all of a sudden, zoom, you take off. And so for some people, it's just a little micro shift, right? I do these one shift away webinars because it's just, one shift in perspective, one shift in a habit, one shift in communication, one shift in awareness can lead to pretty exciting exponential results. And we just have to find what that shift is and then get our shift together.
Right.
So, right. And so for some people, it can work just like that. Some people, when you update a foundational belief, it's updated. If you go from I'm not safe to I am safe, I'm not worthy to I'm more than worthy, that's shifted. You still might have to manage your mindset, but this is what's happening underneath the mindset. This is what drives the mindset, your mental operating system, your unconscious beliefs. And then for others, they still won't believe it because they have conflicts. They have belief conflicts. They think that how they're showing up is protecting them. And so they won't let it go. They won't allow themselves to upgrade because they have another belief underneath that one that says that this is what keeps me safe. This is what keeps me visible. This is what keeps me relevant. This is what makes me successful. You're not going to mess with my mojo. And it
Right.
keeps them trapped, and they don't even know it, right? And so even if they are running $1 billion company, they can. I have clients that run $1 billion company and they're still trapped in these mental prisons that could get them to $5 billion, but because of the fear they have, the mistrust that they have, it keeps them stuck. And so uh, I've heard people say, well, success covers a lot of sins. What does that mean? That's justifying the limiting belief, right? That's not just affecting you, it's affecting those around you. So for those situations, you need to go through, I call it the awakening, right? It's the experience where you create a new emotional experience that actually updates the belief for you. So you're not trying to use willpower or cognitive behavioral therapy or just trying to use enough affirmations and repetition for it to stick. Sometimes that's just like cutting the top off a weed. You need to actually go through a process, the one belief way process, it's in the book, that will literally upgrade your operating system.
So it's interesting. So you talk about, the people who are conscious enough to say, I want to do the deeper work and I want to adjust myself. Then you talk about the people who are maybe resistant to the work. But what about
Mm,
people who just do not even have the self awareness that they
mm.
have limiting beliefs and that those limiting beliefs are limiting their ability to achieve success? How do we, because I'm sure that people in this world interact with people like this daily, right? And these people might say, gosh, I just wish this person would realize that they have these limiting beliefs or what have you. So, what would you recommend, Tim, for people who are working or have family members or friends who seem to have these unconscious biases, these limiting beliefs, but don't have the self awareness to even realize that they have to work on that to be able to break through the ceiling? Or is there anything that we can do?
I mean, that's a really powerful question and one that people ask all the time. How do I get someone else to be more self-aware? How do I get someone else to become more emotionally intelligent? And that's challenging because you got to want to, right? These people got to want to, they're not actively listening to shows like this where they're educating themselves because they think they don't need it or they already know it all. So in those situations, you got to earn their trust and then ask for permission and then make sure that they know that you've got their best interests at heart. And then you can just start to ask them some questions. Do you ever feel, pressured in these situations? Because usually when people are trying to get someone else to change, they point out what they're doing wrong and they point out how it's affecting me, right? But if you keep the focus on what they're doing right and how it could get even better and how it could take the pressure off of them, you're going to keep them open. And you got to go slow. And it's not going to be one conversation. It's going to be several conversations over time. Because again, people are going to not believe you, or they're not going to trust you, or they're going to think that you have a hidden agenda, or they're just scared. They might not call it fear. They might call it stress or pressure or a lot of responsibility, right? Which is code for fear, because they've learned to be tough, right? But that's what's going on, and that's the most honest answer that I can give you. It just takes a little bit of time, and you've got to make sure that you keep the focus on them and catch them doing things right, and then ask for permission to offer a little bit of feedback and just clarify what feedback is. Feedback isn't failure. Feedback is opportunity for growth. What will it do for you, right? It will strengthen our relationship. It'll create more peace while we're excelling, right? It'll create more fun and joy, right? It'll get us both more of what we're really wanting in life. So you clarify the outcomes and the benefits as well. And, that can help people to be more open.
No, that's great, because that sort of segues into one of my other questions, which was, how do you determine the other person's unconscious biases, right? When you are in a negotiation. And when I say negotiation, it doesn't have to be a financial or business negotiation. It can be about your belief systems. It can be about really anything, right? And with today's divided politics, people are negotiating values, right? That's really why everyone feels like they're so divided, because they're just trying to negotiate their values. And so let's talk a little bit about that, about how to discover when you are talking to someone who doesn't think like you, doesn't believe like you. And you said to ask questions, to go slowly. And I think another thing is to be curious about the other person versus judging them, right?
Yes. Well, you just gave the answer right there, right? We got to keep the door in front of our heart open. And the first sign of discomfort, we slam that door closed. And then there's no more understanding, right? So that seek first to be understood, or to understand, then be understood, is really where it's at. So in your mind, and sometimes people are like, well, why do I always have to be the one? Because leaders are the ones. If you have the awareness, if you have this understanding, then you're in charge. So of course it has to be you, right? And the good news is that you have power instead of being powerless and not knowing what's going on. So this is actually wonderful, that it gets to be you. It's not something you have to do, it's something you get to do, right? Little micro shift. And then we focus on, all right, well, what would you have to believe to feel this way? And then we start understanding where their ideas came from and how they arrived at those ideas and why they have those values and where they got those values from. And you really just try to understand at the deepest level, not the argument that's on the surface, but what they're really fighting for, what they're really trying to feel, what they really think is going on and why it matters. And then you might find it comes down to a value that, I want to be someone who is, loving. And then you find a way to connect with that. So do I. I think we have different rules for how to get there, but what we actually want. Some people think you need to have a gun to protect the ones you love. Other people think that you need to get rid of guns to protect the ones you love. So we can connect we're just trying to protect our loved ones. How we're getting there, we have some discussions and disagreements, and we got to try to find some synergy. But if we can connect as human beings and have respect, then we can actually move into solution finding. But when we're debating and trying to prove I'm right and you're wrong, think of it in a company. If you have each your employees and your departments competing with each other, it's going to create chaos, and it's going to cause high employee turnover, and you're going to lose a lot of productivity, and customer satisfaction is going to drop significantly. So you would get the teams collaborating and working together. Even if you have disagreements on different ideas, you come together with a company's set of values, and then you meet at that level, and then you start to operate from there, and you come with respect and collaboration instead of attacking and sarcasm. And then you get higher functioning companies that improve cultures that then improve, customer experiences, because you're improving employee experience first. Right. So I always use that example. We do a terrible job of it in our country as a whole. So if we were going to run our country like a company, we certainly wouldn't do it the way we're doing it now.
It's really interesting that the way you talk about really understanding the unconscious belief system of the other person is very much in alignment with the negotiation strategy of interest-based negotiation versus position-based negotiation. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but for my listeners who maybe
Mm-hmm.
aren't sure what those two are, position-based negotiation is when each person picks a side and they just argue for that side, whereas interest-based, you try to find where's the common interest. And so you're
Mm-hmm.
talking about that, right? You're talking about how where's the value system? Maybe we just want our kids to be safe. We want our families to be safe. And then you start from there. And so in
Mm-hmm.
negotiations, that's the exact same thing, which is to determine where are we in alignment. And so you want to just go deeper and deeper and deeper. And then once we get to alignment, then we can start having productive conversations because we're starting from a common ground, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes.
So,
And that
yeah.
makes sense. I mean, that's how you become influential. That's become then, the most influential people are not the ones that are the most talkative. They're the ones that are the best listeners. And if you know what kind of questions to ask, then you're going to get a lot more listening coming from that. And, it reminds me of a quick story. There was this woman and she needed to hire someone for a high level position. And so she had two final candidates. So she invited them both to meet with her. And she sat down with the first person, and the first person started telling them all about themselves and all their accomplishments, everything they had done. And by the end of the conversation, she felt like he was the one of the most impressive people she ever met. And then she sat down with the second person, and they started talking back and forth. And then he was asking her questions about, how she got to her level and some of the challenges she had and how she'd overcome them and what was going on and what her aspirations were and things like that. And by the end of the conversation, she felt like she was the most impressive person she had ever met. Who do you think she hired? Right? She hired the second one, yes, because of how they made him feel, right? And the kind of questions and the kind of conversation that they had. You're just going to be more productive. I mean, there's people that are negotiating like trial lawyers, and they will get what they want. But Wayne Dyer used to say, "You want to be," or I think it was Dr. Phil said, "You want to be right or you want to be happy."
Yep.
And a lot of people would rather be right, and they get what they want, but they create a lot of enemies, and they're just not happy people because they're always moving through life with a heart at war.
I love that phrase, a heart at war. It's very powerful because I feel like there are a lot of people these days, who have that. So, yeah, and I would love to um I would love to have a little role play. So, like I know I'm
Hmm.
just springing this on you, but we
Let's do
talk a
it.
lot about the what, and I know my listeners hear frequently about being more curious, ask more
Hmm.
questions, get to an
Hmm.
alignment, discover that. But then I feel like we miss out on helping them understand what that looks like. Like people say, I don't know what kind of questions to ask. And so I
Hmm.
would love to just like you and I can kind of pick a topic and you ask me the questions to exemplify to my listeners how do we ask those questions that go deeper and deeper and deeper, right?
Okay,
Are you
sure.
game?
I'm game. Let's play.
All right, fabulous. Let's see. What do you think would be an interesting topic to understand a little bit deeper about me?
Yeah. And just notice real quick how we already set the belief. We already set the intention. We set the intention that this is going to be a game and we're going to play. And if you go through life feeling like whatever you're doing is a game and you're going to play, and remember that every game has obstacles. We want to get rid of the obstacles. No, the obstacles are what make the game fun. If you're playing Pac-Man and there's no ghost trying to get you, then what would be the point?
That's true.
Right?
I love it. I love it. And people are
Yeah.
competitive, right? A lot of people are naturally competitive. And so
Hmm.
it becomes fun. And I think to your point, the stakes are lower when you frame it as a game. So it's very much like you said, like shifting little bit of a perspective, right? To say, okay, let's just make this a game. So then suddenly it's not so serious, it's not so heavy, it's a little bit
Yeah.
lighter and a little bit easier. And I think with practice, you get better and better at it. So you can do it in real life where the stakes are high and you still maintain that confidence.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you go in and you're more calm, you're really the one in charge. If you go in and you're all amped up, people are going to feel that energy before you've even said a word. I mean, like 90% of communication is nonverbal, right? So your body, your tone, your facial expressions are saying a lot before you even open your mouth. All right. So my question for you, Alice, is what's most important to you about negotiations?
So for me, it's not so much me and negotiation. It's more that I'm very, very passionate about everyone becoming good at negotiations because I feel like it will bring everyone closer together versus so many people not having negotiation skills or good communication skills and everyone's getting driven apart. So I'm very passionate about making sure as many people as possible can learn to negotiate.
Okay, great. So making sure that people use these skills to come closer together. What would be another one? What else is important to you about that?
I also feel like it's important to understand that you can negotiate not to win, but to get to a win win.
Okay. So to create win-win situations, what's something else?
Um, to really, for me, I really feel like I want to get better at negotiation so that I can also clearly communicate what I want and need so that it's clearly understood by the other party.
Yeah. And why does that matter so much to you?
Because it cuts down on the amount of friction and the amount of conversation to get to where you want to go.
Yes. Have you had experiences like that where it was just, you know, overwhelming or too much friction and it led you to say, you know what, I'm going to figure this out for myself and then I'm going to teach others too?
Yes. Well, so I was married for 7 years, in that relationship for 10, and it was fraught.
Hmm.
And I believe it had a lot to do with the fact that I did not have the skill sets to be able to navigate through conflict or difficult conversations. And so they either didn't happen at all or they ended up being like extended fights.
Yeah, which anybody that's married can relate to that. So that happens when you're growing and sometimes when you're not growing. So so you wanted to improve communication in a marriage to, to reduce friction or to grow love so that you could have perhaps stayed married. But you decided to call it negotiations instead. So what's the difference between negotiations versus, like effective communication?
So to me, negotiation, the definition of negotiation is when two or more parties are trying to get on the same page. And so it doesn't matter if I say, "Hey Tim, let's go take a trip to Hawaii," and you say, "I'd rather just go down to San Diego." That's a negotiation, right? So I feel like people do not realize they are in multiple negotiations daily, whether they know that or not. Like every communication where you're trying to get to an agreement is a negotiation.
Yeah. So everything you're doing is a negotiation, and it's going to ultimately lead to being happy or being frustrated or sad because of the friction, right? So what would you have to believe in order to feel like every conversation's a negotiation.
Wait, I'm not sure I understand that. What would I have to
Yeah.
believe?
Yeah. What do you think, where'd that idea came from that everything's a negotiation?
Um, Mainly from the studies that I went through. I did a lot of training, whether it was through Yale or Harvard or University of Michigan. So I did a lot of training,
Mhm.
and all
Mhm.
of the training points to one direction, which is let's get to an agreement, and all the different strategies to get to an agreement, all the strategies either to beat the other person or get to the win-win or get to the win-lose, whatever it is. It was always about getting to like some kind of end
Mhm.
to a situation where two or more parties are not on the same page.
And when you finally get to that agreement, how do you feel inside?
Victorious, satisfied,
Yeah. And if you don't get to that agreement, what's it stir up inside?
frustration, maybe not feeling heard, right? Because
Mhm.
it's not
Mhm.
necessarily about me getting what I want, it's about getting to a resolution. And so if we don't get to a resolution, I may feel, well, both sides might feel dissatisfied and unheard.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right. Before you clarified it, I think that when we're trying to negotiate, or you specifically, when you're trying to negotiate, if it doesn't go the way that you want it to, where we find agreement, you don't feel heard, right? And so, was there ever a time, and we don't have to go this deep on a podcast, but was there times in your life, in your childhood, when you didn't feel heard?
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. And so what we could do in that situation now, from for this example, I understand now that what's most important to you is that you want to feel heard, and that we get to an agreement, because that makes you feel victorious and peaceful inside, because you feel heard. It's not even you getting what you want. It's the fact that you felt heard, right? And that honors something inside of you and makes you feel worthy and valued.
Right.
So now when I'm talking to you, I asked you a question, to try to understand some of your values, right? And so you value training and understanding. You value teaching people how to get to agreement. You value the importance of it because we're negotiating all the time. And so it's a big part of your life, whether at work or at home or in your marriage, right? It could save your marriage, and or help you get to the point where it's time to end it, right? And get into a new relationship. And so that's very important. So now I understand what's really driving you. And at the deepest level, I know that at the end of our negotiation, I need to make sure that you feel heard, and that will keep conversations moving forward. That will keep level of respect in place. That will keep the ability to negotiate and find agreement on the table, as long as I keep figuring that out. Okay. So all I did was I started off with a simple question of what's most important to you about this job, the relationship, this negotiation, this contract, our marriage, being a parent, right? And then what else? What else? What else? And then I'm listening. And then when you start to talk about things that are more personal, then I'll go deeper on that one question instead of just keeping it shallow. Then I'll start to go a little bit deeper. So when you started telling me about your marriage, and then you started telling me about, how you were feeling inside, then I was able to follow that down. Now, I'm good at that because I practice it all the time, right? So it might be more challenging for someone else, but uh, you can start with a what would you have to believe, and just try to understand 3 or 4 times, what they value most. And then, and if they talk about anything personal, that's where you get interested. What'd you have to, where'd that come from? Or if it works out, how does it make you feel? If it doesn't work out, how does that make you feel? And usually you'll learn more by if it doesn't work out, what do
Right.
you think that means? That means I lost. That means I'm weak. That means that I wasn't heard. That means that I'm not valued. That means that I'm going to lose opportunity. Right. And so, well, where'd that come from? Right. And then you trace it back to when you were a kid, and because that's when that belief was first formed, not in this moment. And so that's an example of what it looks like in action.
Thank you so much, Tim. That was fabulous, and hopefully my listeners got a lot out of it. I love the intersection between the work that you do and the work that I do, because they are definitely like very much like in the same sort of vein, because as a mediator, my job is to ask those kind of questions, right? To really get really deep and understand like what's driving the conflict, because typically what they say is driving the conflict is not what's actually driving the conflict. It's usually something
Mm,
else that's hidden, right?
hmm.
And so it's my
That's
job to
right.
uncover that. So I think that's like really wonderful. It's all, built into psychology, right?
Hmm.
And understanding
Yeah.
humans and how our thoughts, are deep deep thoughts that we don't uncover, are what's driving a lot of our behavior.
Yeah. That's
Wouldn't you say?
exactly right. Yeah, that was beautifully said. That's your drop the mic moment. That was so good. I can't comment. I mean, that was really good.
I mean, so yeah, it's fantastic. So this has been like lovely, Tim. I've enjoyed it very much, and I'm hoping that people really can understand through the role play that you and I just did, like how to ask deeper questions, being curious, right? Not showing up and saying, because I want everyone to notice Tim never showed judgment when he asked me questions. I never felt it, because if you did, I would feel it, because as you mentioned, it's nonverbal communication. And so even if we're not in person, what's the nonverbal communication? The tone, the choice of words, maybe your facial expression, right? So I would pick up on that. And a lot of times I'm picking up on that subconsciously,
Hmm.
right?
Oh,
Not
yeah.
even
All the
conscious,
time. All the
right?
time we're picking up on that. Yes.
Right. And so then if I felt any kind of judgment from your tone, I'm going to clam up, because I'm not going to feel safe.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So if you
Yeah.
think in your mind, oh, this Alice, she's stupid. She doesn't know what she's talking about. I'm going to sense it. And suddenly my answers are going to look very, very different than what they did just a few minutes ago.
Well, yes, you'll shift from authentic into protector.
Yes.
Or if you're that threatened, you'll turn into attacker.
Yeah.
You'll switch your strategy and start going after the person you're working with, and neither one of those are gonna produce a fruitful outcome.
And so, because we are in the times that we are, and it's very divided, and people feel a lot of fear, I'd love to just talk very briefly some takeaways for people to be able to decrease the fear, to be able to increase the curiosity, to be able to bridge the divides that they're feeling, so that they have like something really tangible to walk away with after they listen to this particular podcast.
Well, Gandhi said, if you want to see a change in the world, be a change in the world. And I've always said, what it matters more what happens in your house than what happens in the White House. So if we can use a simple three-step strategy, just think that your mind works like a GPS. You type in the destination you want it to take you to, and then you just start going step at a time. And if you make a mistake, the GPS doesn't beat up on you. It just says, make a U-turn over here. And then it course corrects to get you to your destination the quickest. Your mind works that way too. We just don't use it the same way. What we tend to do is we focus on where we don't want to go, how we don't want to feel, what we don't want to have happen. And so that's like telling your GPS, I don't want to go to the post office. It says getting directions to the post office,
Right.
right? So that one little shift of taking a few breaths, 5 breaths in through your nose. This is a powerful strategy to slow down and get centered. You look up. When you look up, it quiets the voice in your head. If you can't turn your voice off, your mind's always going, just look up. When you look up and then you breathe through your nose 5 times in a row, breathe in through your nose, down to your belly, then slowly exhale. Do it 5 times in a row. That activates your relaxation response. That'll allow you to feel more calm and peaceful so that you can ask a better question. All right, what do I want to have happen? How do I want this to go? What's one thing I can do to have this show up in my life right now? If you want more peace in the world, you got to have more peace within yourself. Then you'll bring that peace into your marriage. You'll bring that peace to your children. You'll bring that peace to your space, to your company, with your employees or with your colleagues. And then you're part of the solution instead of constantly stressed and arguing and yelling because of what's going on, because that's not doing anything but throwing gas on the fire, right? No matter how agitated, no matter how much you yell, that doesn't change anything. And so that's just, and it flames the fire. And so what we want to do is take a power breath, and we ask a more powerful question, and then we focus on what we can do to move in that direction. We make our move, right? So power breath, power question, make your move. And remember that your mind works like a GPS. So if you keep focusing on what you want, how you want to feel, and then you play to win, you're going to get there.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I want to mention to my listeners that the breathing that you're talking about is also very effective when you're feeling really mad, really angry, and you can't think because your amygdala has now hijacked your brain. To be able to
Mhm.
just do the deep breathing, slowing everything down, and within even 3 cycles of breathing slowly, they're going to notice a shift in their entire body, right? That whatever
Yeah.
anger and frustration that you're feeling is actually muted, right? And I always
Yes,
tell people,
yes.
try not to communicate when you're feeling like that because it's never going to go well. You want to try to calm yourself down, to go into a calm conversation. So I think that's a really great point. And the other point I want to remind people is that most of the time when people are in conflict, I don't know why, maybe it's something to do with when they were a child, but they resort to, like you said earlier, I'm bringing back a previous point, being right versus what is my goal,
Yeah.
right?
That's
And if we
right.
can make
That's
that
right.
shift of like not having to be right, but focusing
Mhm.
laser focused on what is the goal of this conversation versus let
Yes.
me prove that I am right at all cost.
Yes. So what I've always studied is what keeps that from happening. Why do people have the best intentions and they go right back to losing their mind or saying things or chasing people or withdrawing, right? And going back into the same behavior over and over. And it's because of what's driving that behavior. So the power breathing will help. The power questions will help you to look at the what's going on in the moment and start to shift your behavior. But if it's not getting where you need to be, it's because it's like throwing dirt on weeds. It's not going to work if you don't address the underlying issues, because sometimes in a relationship, in a marriage, one person with the right belief system, every time they feel pressure and stress, they start to withdraw. The other person experiences that as abandonment, so they get bigger and more intense. And now you have someone with more intensity coming over to some because they're afraid they're going to lose the connection. And then you have somebody else who hates that intensity because of how they were raised. And so they withdraw even more. And so you do literally the opposite of what's going to get you both the connection and the peace and the love that you ultimately both want in the first place. So you got to figure out what the beliefs are underneath that behavior. If you are trying to do all this and it's not working, that's why you have your solution now. Your biggest breakthroughs are hiding in the places you don't want to go. So if you find yourself resisting with this, that's where your next breakthrough is going to happen.
Powerful, powerful stuff, Tim. I think that is really great. And I really encourage our listeners to like make it into a game, right? To try to get to know each other better, to try to understand the underlying root causes of the belief systems. Just it because it can feel heavy and it can feel scary and it can feel uber vulnerable. So just lighten it by saying, you know what, let's play a game for 5 minutes and let's do it every day. And all of a sudden, after a month of doing the game, you're really it becomes a part of who you are and the way you communicate. Like you mentioned, and I mentioned, that we can ask these questions easily because we're doing this all day, every day in our profession. But if other people want to elevate their skill level, all they have to do is practice, right? They don't have to become a mediator. They don't have to become, a mind architect. They're able to do it just through daily, consistent practice of asking each other these deeper questions.
So if people want to find me, and you can find me on social media, I'm on all the channels. You can also click in the show notes. So we'll put a link in there so you can get the high performer switch. It's a 4-minute audio I created to help you to get back into flow state. So you can just listen to it on your phone for 4 minutes. It'll help you feel more peaceful. And if you need some support shifting, then you can always join one of our monthly One Shift Away webinars.
Thank you so much, Tim, for sharing your wisdom here with us today. It was lovely having you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, listeners. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in to another episode of Negotiation with Alice.